Hello and welcome to That Interview Experience, the show that's aimed to help 16 to 18-year-olds break into the world of work with confidence and hopefully a little bit of arrogance and possibility as well. I'm joined as always by, is it with or by? By Helen.
Joined with. Well, I'm here, so I'll join you.
Oh, there you go. So Helen and I, my lovely host Helen, co-host Helen. So how's your day been?
Yeah, really good. Yeah. Always good spending time with you, Ash.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, it's been a good morning actually. So I'm looking forward to today. I mean, I look forward to all our episodes, and we're going to be joined by Sally Hindmarch, who runs a quite cool company where she actually teaches people to be more confident and present themselves more effectively. And I know that she's quite excited about being on this little show because when Sally and I have spoken in the past, I think we once had a 20-minute phone call that turned into nigh on 90 minutes because we were just putting the education system to right between us. And I definitely believe that if we stood for office, we would make great changes and yeah, the world would be a better place. I think we'd certainly talk about it anyway, whether any action would be taken. So Sally, welcome. How are you? Great to have you on.
Thank you. I am very well indeed, and excited.
Excellent. That's brilliant. So let's kick off with a really simple thing, just for people listening, watching. I gave you a brief intro, but just you say it the way that you say it. Tell people who you are, a little bit about your background, perhaps, just so we've got some context for the rest of the show.
So I'm Sally Hindmarch. I run a company called Partners With You. And for the last 20 years, we have helped our clients to look and sound more confident than they feel. So we work with business people who are uncomfortable in presenting, being more assertive, making a great first impression, or generally just feel uncomfortable in their own skin when they've got an audience.
So it could be an audience of 150, or it could be an audience of 2.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Sitting across a table, giving feedback to somebody, whatever the situation, can be as uncomfortable for some people as standing up in front of the great and the good of your industry with thousands of future employers watching you as you do a presentation. Your physical reaction and what's going on in your head is actually very similar. And the techniques that you can use to calm yourself down and create the image you want is the same in both situations. So once you learn the techniques, you can use them in any of those moments of discomfort.
That's cool. I've just realized, I haven't just realized, but I've just been reminded of something. Great tangent. But you two have company names that are incredibly similar, but different enough, which says a lot about who you are. So, Sally, your company name is?
Partners With You.
And Helen?
Your People Partners.
I just think that's really cool.
I mean, we're in different industries, Sally, but we kind of want the same for the people that we work with, which is to help them be awesome and be confident in themselves.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, that's really cool. Really cool.
I think that's really cool. So, okay, so first question, kick it off. Sally, when you are recruiting, okay, or you're helping, perhaps in this context, when maybe you're helping people to go through that recruitment process, because I suspect some of your clients have done that sort of work with you. What are people looking for in a candidate, and more specifically, a 16, 17, 18-year-old who is stepping out into that world of work for the first time? There's all the fear and nervousness around the interview experience, the uncertainty about whether it's the right job for me, whether I'm doing it because my parents are telling me I should do it, or the school careers advisor when I was 7 said, yes, you're going to be a doctor because you know how to cut a mouse in half. And I'm just, what that happened. So Yeah, what is it that you look for in a young person?
Not your ability to cut a mouse in half, that's for sure. As I never got to cutting animals up, I couldn't face it, so I stood at the back of the room with my back to it.
Don't be a doctor.
Personality and attitude, always.
Yeah.
I was told by one of our very first clients, we helped run some interview processes for them, and they were training their managers to interview more effectively. And what one of them said is, far too often we recruit on aptitude and sack for attitude.
Yeah.
And that's what we're looking for, and when we work with our clients to help them be better interviewers, is to get them to understand that actually, the fact that you can tell the difference between 6 different types of bricks is something that can be taught. But your ability to read a room, be able to work with other people, be curious, engaging, interact, be proactive, they're much harder to teach. So what they're looking for are people who are already showing signs of those skills.
Yeah.
So they don't have to start from square one. And certainly when I'm recruiting, I have always looked for young and old people who are curious, interested, and interesting.
So in this country and in the States, in Germany, France, lots of countries where I've recruited, the recruitment process always starts with a CV. Don't even get me started. This could end up being a 3-hour podcast if you want me to talk about why I think CVs are really not an indicator. And I'm sure you agree, they're not an indicator of how successful you can be in a company, but we use them. So It's a way that an 18-year-old can tell you as an employer, hey, look at me. Those things that you want to see in those people, regardless of age, how do you spot that on a CV?
It's usually under their interests and things they have done outside of school.
Yep.
So it's the volunteering that they've done. It's the Saturday job. The last thing I want is somebody who has gone through the education system, has got a first-class degree, and that is it.
Yep.
What I want is somebody who at 16 was working in their local stables or garden centre or cafe or somewhere where they were learning to work with people of different ages. I don't want somebody in their early 20s who has never worked at a level pegging with somebody 30 or 40 years older than them.
Yeah.
I'm looking for somebody who was a waitress in a cafe and worked their way up to supervisor during the holidays at university. I'm looking for people who went to guides or scouts or helped at the local old people's home. That's where I'm going to find out about this individual, not or set up their own podcast or did their own YouTube. I don't particularly think that I'm going to find out a lot about the individual if they've put I like reading and watching telly as their interests.
Yeah.
So if that's all you're doing, then you probably need to go and find something else to do that you can put on your CV that we can talk about, because
it's the interest.
Chester Housewives isn't going to do it for me.
No, but what if, let's take TV and reading, because a lot of people 10 upwards do a lot of reading and do a lot of TV watching. What if it was reading Shakespeare or reading plays? So they've been a little bit more specific and watching documentaries about death row. Maybe don't put on TV,
absolutely. If they say things like, I don't care what they read and watch. So if they say I like reading, like romance, and I like watching reality TV, that's fine, so long as we can have a discussion about it. Why do you enjoy reality TV? What is it that you find interesting about it? How are you using any lessons you're learning from watching these people's lives where they've married somebody at first sight. What have you gleaned from that program?
That's it. Yeah.
That's interesting, because my my little one, well, not so little anymore because 18 is not.
Yes, you'll love that description.
But there's a real she's watching lots and lots of serial killer stuff at the moment. Okay, and why? And the answer is, I'm really interested in the psychology of how criminals think, because she's doing psychology for A-level.
Yep.
And actually, the medium is almost irrelevant, isn't it? She's just using it as a medium to get more information. She's also reading psychology books and listening to podcasts on criminal psychology and stuff like that. So it just happens to be another medium. So I think the more specific you are about the extracurricular skills, for lack of another word, that you are applying yourself to, the more curious and the more curiosity you create for the employer.
Yeah, it's showing your curiosity and your interest, because frankly, just because you have volunteered or worked, if I'm talking to you about it and I say, so tell me more about your volunteering work, and you then say, well, I just go in on a Saturday afternoon. That
doesn't mean anything, does it?
No, I'd rather have a conversation with you about
gardening.
Well, about anything, but I want to have a conversation with you. The fact that I'm the adult and you're, the interviewee is irrelevant. I'm asking questions because I want to get to know you, and you need to give me something to hang my conversation. We call it naked answers. Don't give me a naked answer. Don't give me a yes or no answer if I ask a question, because I then have to work really hard to maintain the conversation. So I then start thinking, that was really difficult. Do I want to work with this person who makes my life difficult? And you're nervous, and that's why you're doing it. But what you need to do is, when I say, so, Blake, where do you come from? Don't just go the next village or Hounslow. Tell me something about it. I live, or High Wycombe. I mean, depending on who I'm talking to, I live in High Wycombe. It used to be the furniture centre of the world. James Corden's from there. Sandy Shaw comes from High Wycombe as well. Now, most people under the age of 50 don't know who Sandy Shaw is. But if I'm meeting somebody new and they go, where do you come from? And I just go, High Wycombe, they may well go, you can almost see the cogs going. Where is that? The least I can say is it's halfway between Birmingham and London, or it's at the bottom of the Chilterns. But to give them something that they can then go, oh, that's interesting. Do you go walking? I love to walk. And now we've got some commonality, and now we can start a conversation. So try not to give any naked answers to any question, whether it's volunteering or the reality show you like watching.
And I guess if you're prepping, if you've got your CV in front of you and you've said, oh, I'd love to meet with you, then make sure you've done your homework on, okay, yes, I put volunteering. She might ask me about that. So think about how you're going to answer that and what it means to you, Sally. Do you see what I mean? It's about making it relevant to why you're asking that question. It's not just a random story about, well, my mum worked in a children's home growing up and I was really interested in social care and it has to be something that's meaningful.
You in the same way as a business have to look at anything that they're producing and send out to the outside world and ask themselves, so what? You have to do the same with your CV. You have to look at it and go, well, these are my interests, so what? I did these A-levels, so what? What was the reason? And, I took A-levels, and the reason was they were the only ones I was allowed to do because I didn't get the qualifications at O-level that I needed to be able to do any other A-levels. And I had to fight to be able to do one of them because they're not that good. But, it's that, telling a future employer that the reason I'm doing those A-levels is because I couldn't do anything else isn't probably the best answer I could have chosen. Choose, you are doing those A levels, so what is it that you enjoy doing about them?
And actually something you just said there, if I was interviewing you and you gave that answer, I would say to you, so why did you have to fight? And how did that go? You know, what was it? So in my world, when I was choosing my A-levels, I really wanted to do British and American politics, but the school I was at, really nice school in Ickenham, so not far from you in High Wycombe, really nice school, they did British and Russian politics. Didn't float my boat. So it was very unusual for that school for anyone to leave to go to sixth form college elsewhere. And I did that. And to me, that makes me that, you know, all of my peers stayed at school. I was the one that got on the Metropolitan line every day from Hillingdon to Harrow on the Hill to go to college because I wanted to do that one A-level. It cost my parents a lot of money for me to do that. It's not cheap to travel, you know.
Commuting every day, yeah.
Every day. And to put so what does that tell you about me? I was prepared at the age of 16 to put myself out there a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the sake of one A.
It's the padding that's so important, not just the facts. It's what sits around that.
So it's fascinating this. So you're talking very much about giving your message, as I understand it, is making sure that people give the interviewer the opportunity to unpick the stories behind the person.
Yeah.
Because the stories are what make us all unique.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't have those opportunities to go, so what? And what did that mean? And why did you do it? It's really, really hard work for the interviewer. So I think that's really interesting what you said there, because I think sometimes we go into these situations going, well, I just want to give a clear, concise, simple answer and get out there as quickly as possible.
Yes,
and people almost rehearse the answers.
Yes, and you don't want to waffle. You know, if you're asked a question that
you need to answer it.
Where do you come from, or how was your journey? Yeah, I'm not that interested. I don't want a blow-by-blow account of, you know,
I woke up at 7. Didn't know what shirt to wear,
and you know who you had to sit next to, and what the bus driver said to you. You know, I'm not that interested. But equally, you know, don't just give yes and no answers and one word answers, because you know, in any situation, it just makes it all a lot harder work.
Yeah. So what is your just moving on a little bit, what's your favorite interview question?
What to give or to receive? When I interview people, I like to. My questions are scenario based, so dependent on but it's often I will ask questions like, so I often, most of the apprentices I've worked with have been employed in social media and marketing roles for the business. And so I would say, I've just given you a blog, which I've written. I ask you to sense check it and post it for me. You notice that there's a typo in there. Do you tell me? You also notice that there's something you don't agree with. Do you tell me? And then we'll have this conversation about whatever their answer is. So what's this? Why wouldn't you? Why would you? How would you do that? I also usually, because we're a very small team and there's always a customer service facing part of the role, whatever the role is, I will get them to write a letter of complaint. So I'll tell them that I've got some building work to be done at home, that I'm not very happy about it. I need to write a letter of complaint. Could they draft one up for me? These are the issues, and I will list them. And then I'll say, 20 minutes, can you write me a letter to the builders? And I'll leave them. And then when they come back, I'm able to see, have they got all the 4 things that I said were issues detailed? So have they listened? Have they taken on board? Have they just done I'm very unhappy about this? Or have they been a little bit more ingenious, interesting, reactive, proactive about it? And that can be a really useful tool.
So I would add on to that, where I would say, this is the scenario. We have a builder at home and they've messed up. I'd like you to deal with it, or whatever the complaint is. What would your process be? And if it includes a letter or email, write it. Because what I also want to do there is I don't just want to see how they respond. I want to see what their thinking is. We'll see if they'll make a phone call at any point. I'll also invite them to make as many assumptions as they like, but be prepared for me to challenge on the assumptions, which is quite difficult. If I was a 16, 18, 19-year-old to do that, I would find that really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I the first time I came across that was at my interview when I was in my mid-20s.
Right.
And my boss really did have a problem with her builder, and she was too busy. So she got everybody she interviewed that day to write a letter of complaint so that evening she could
press one. Yeah.
She mangled 2 or 3 together, she said.
Brilliant.
But it does mean that I get to see how good they are at writing on the fly. And, you know, if you've had 3 hours to prepare a document, that's very different to 20 minutes to get your thoughts down on a piece of paper. And in the office, you want people who are, you know, able to react quickly, put down, take on board information, and that as a way of identifying whether or not this person is what you're looking for. It's a great starting point. I may well include the process next time.
And if you're the sort of business owner who, so you need them to do that in 20 minutes. So because that's your environment.
Yeah.
I work with a tech company where we actually need to give them an assessment for 2 hours. We're not going to do that necessarily in the office. Sometimes we do, COVID allowing, obviously. What we actually changed was, we're going to invite you to do this assessment. Tell me a time that I can send it to you before the interview, that I know that you've got a period of time that you can invest in this. We expect one of our engineers to take about 2 hours. It is not a timed test. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and then when they come back, at the interview, then that's the first part of the interview. So tell us your approach. Now you've done it, and now we've given you solutions. How would you do it again? What would your approach be? Where did you do it? What was your setup at home, especially if they're working from home? How long did it take you? And if they tell 2 hours and 10 minutes, great. If it took 4 hours, why did it take 4 hours? Where were you stuck? So you're using that example to actually interview them about something that's real, and you can really gauge how well you and they communicate with issues.
Yeah.
How does that, for the young people listening, especially, but I think also quite key for employers who might be listening and watching to this, how would you kind of sum up that advice and process for people listening? What's the takeaway from that kind of interview question that they might face?
Is it preparation, Sally?
Sorry?
Preparation, do you think?
I think it's preparation. I think the takeaway is probably from in general, most employers are not great at interviewing. It's not something we do very often. And it's often, I mean, I can remember when I worked for somebody else and I had a team and I would go into an interview. It was usually 4:30. I'd had been there back-to-back meetings all day, pick up a CV, walk into a room and hope somehow I could get to know this individual in 30 minutes. That's no way to approach an interview. So preparation for both teams, those interviewing and interviewers, is important. And I think the other thing to think about from the interviewee's point of view is that preparation, you don't have to be 100% right.
Correct. Yeah.
It's about understanding that what I'm looking for in people who work for me are people who are willing to make a decision and stand by it. I'm all for empowering people, but I need to know that person is going to make a decision because they believe that X, Y, and Z was the right thing to do. And that's the sort of thing I'm looking for when I'm interviewing, is somebody who can show me that, it may have taken me 4 hours to do that. But that's how long it took me. There's no right or wrong answer, but so what took you that long? And it might be that, well, I did it in 2 hours, but I then spent 2 hours double checking it and doing it all over again because I wanted to make sure it was right. So
because this is an interview and it's important.
yeah, exactly. But you know, if you go, well, I don't know why it took me 4 hours, then I'm going to question whether or not you've got the right attitude for what I'm doing. I think our education system tends to produce young people who are very good at receiving information and acting on it. Unfortunately for them, they're moving into an environment at business where very few employers are looking for people to just say yes and do it without questioning and without being able to process what's going on around them, and who aren't proactive. But it's very hard. Employers need to remember that expecting a young person to suddenly walk out of an environment where they're pretty much spoon-fed information and then have to regurgitate it at various points, to suddenly feel comfortable turning around to the grown-up, whoever that is, and going, I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. I wouldn't do it that way. I wouldn't use Facebook for this because, you know, nobody of my age is ever going to go on that. You know, we need to be looking at TikTok or some other piece of social media, which I've never heard, you know, you've never heard of, but that's where this audience are going to be. That's not a conversation that's necessarily going to be very comfortable for them. So just saying things like, so have you got anything else to add? Have you got any thoughts? Chances are they're not going to say yes, because that's not what's been wanted of them in very many schools.
Yeah, it is changing, thankfully.
Yeah.
But I think there is a systemic issue that you've identified there, and individual schools and teachers are working very hard despite that system to try and change it.
Absolutely. And you know, don't get me wrong, you know, there are many
fast enough.
many employers I know who, you know, say they want proactive, independent young people walking into their office, but actually don't want to actually have a young anybody who questions their decision making and who believe that they're right in all cases. And my advice to you then is to leave, find another job, because that's never going to be a fun environment to work in.
Unless you thrive, unless you're not a natural challenger, in which case, if you're just a doer and you just need to be told and you get it done, then that's the right environment for you, you know. So but it is about that independent thinking, isn't it, and being able to challenge authority in a really good way.
Yeah, it's about understanding how you can communicate more effectively with the people around you. You know, but at the interview, that's quite hard to do. There are certain things, you know, you can. Well, I know somebody who, when he interviews people, he puts a chair by the door, not near his desk. And what he is looking for is whether or not they sit down at the chair by the door or whether they pull the chair towards the desk. Because that is a really good indicator of whether they sit on what I call a discerning axis or a dynamic axis. So if you are a doer and you just want to get stuff done, you are likely to move the chair. Wouldn't cross your mind not to, because you want to sit near. Whereas if you are a little bit more discerning and more of a thinker and like to think before you act, you are probably going to look at it and go, well, there's a reason why he's put that there. I'll sit down.
Until I'm told otherwise.
Yes, and it's not, you know, or you're not proactive, you're not by sitting there. It's just that is a really good indicator as to where on the axis you sit, and that will define what questions you're asked, and how they put together the interview. But it's understanding that some of us are doers and some of us are thinkers, and that's true of your employer as well as your employee. So if you are a doer and you are being interviewed by somebody who's more a thoughtful person who likes a lot of information, then you need to give them a lot more detail than somebody who's interviewing who's big picture and don't waste my time with the, you know, I don't want to dot I's and cross T's. That's what your job is. Let's talk about the big picture.
I think the other thing that I've taken from this conversation with you, Sally, is this principle of perhaps as employers, we need to be working and honing our interview skills as much as the interviewee needs to get ready for them. Because I think that a lot of this is around, that interview experience from the perspective of the 16, 18-year-old going into the world of work for the first time. But actually, we as employers have as much a responsibility to play if this is going to be a halfway house relationship.
And don't forget that you are being interviewed too.
Yes.
Well, yes. 100%.
And the way you behave, and it's yes, you've had 1,000 CVs in, and yes, you've had to interview 20 people. But if you don't bother to tell the people who aren't going to be interviewed or who aren't going to get the job, then they are left with this taste about the business that will follow them through. So in 10 years' time, when they are a senior developer and you didn't even bother to tell them that they hadn't got the job, when are they going to come to you when they're the best in the industry? Probably not. And if they are, you are certainly aren't going to be their first choice. And as a consumer, they're not going to be interested in what you sell versus. So you can do yourself a huge amount of damage, and you've no idea who they're related to, who they're going to tell about their lousy experience. So I think there is a lot of onus on us as employers to treat other people, interviewees, as you would want to be treated yourself.
That goes two ways as well. So if I'm 18 and I've interviewed with you, Sally, and I don't get the job, and you've told me I haven't got the job, and you either did or I'm sure you would give me feedback, but if you're a business owner that doesn't, thank you for your time. On this occasion, you haven't been selected. Feel free as an 18-year-old to write an email to that person who interviewed you, because your paths may well cross again.
Absolutely.
And
thank you for the opportunity. What could I have done better?
Yeah.
All it needs to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that we all forget that it's not an encounter that's in a silo.
No, it's not finite. Not a 1 or 0. Who knows where that could develop? In 6 months there might be another vacancy, and as a business owner, you're going to say, do you know what? They were humble enough and confident enough to email me.
Yes,
I would always keep that email.
Yeah,
always.
Absolutely. And I can think of several situations when I have worked for other companies, so my previous roles, where we have gone back to people who didn't get the job initially because 2 days later somebody else had resigned, or a new opportunity. They weren't quite right for that role, but then a sales role came up and we were actually, that person wasn't field sales, but they absolutely were office sales. Let's get them back in.
Absolutely.
So yes, without a doubt. You just want to know that they're interested and interesting. That's the key, and that's from both points of view. I don't want to work in an environment where I'm going to feel uncomfortable, and equally I don't want somebody to come into the office who's going to create discomfort for other people. So that's really what you should be looking for, from both points of view, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Sally, that is just amazing. It's been really good talking to you, and just I'm really enjoying doing these little meetings and having these conversations. We're getting so much out of them, and obviously I hope, Helen and I hope, that people watching and listening take one thing away, and add it to your little armory and help you get ready for that experience that you're going to go through. And the big message for me today, I think, is that it's not a singular experience. It is a process, and whether you get through that interview or not, I know it's not irrelevant, but certainly at this stage of your career there will be lots and lots and lots of further opportunities, and just make sure you're that 1% better next time you go through.
It's how you brush yourself off.
Yes.
Definitely.
Sally, thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure. Lovely to see you both.
And you. Thank you so much.